everybody. It's Johnny C. Cochran, candidate for Congress, Alabama's 4th Congressional District. And today we are joined by Miss Marty of the Alabama Cannabis Coalition. Marty, could you tell us a little bit about your organization and maybe, why you're so passionate about this particular issue?
Okay, well, my name is Marty Schelper, and I am the founder and the president of a grassroots organization in the state of Alabama called the Alabama Cannabis Coalition. I'm also a registered cannabis lobbyist here in the state of Alabama, and I always tell people when I say that I'm a lobbyist, people always get a little bit, wiry or crazy about lobbyists, but I'm an unpaid lobbyist. I'm lobbying for the citizens of the state of Alabama. So I'm not paid by industry. I'm here fighting for citizens' rights to the access to be able to home grow, expungement of cannabis convictions, decriminalization, and legalization in the state of Alabama. And there are other cannabis lobbyists here in the state that are not lobbying for the citizens. So I just want to make that differentiation that I am here fighting for the people that are hopefully going to be watching this video. And I've been a cannabis advocate in the state of Alabama for 11 years. I started another organization called Alabama Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition, trying to bring conservatives out of their proverbial closet. And let me see, the medical cannabis passed in May the 6th of 2021. So I've kind of put the Alabama Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition on the back burner because nobody wanted to get involved with that. But I started the ACC in February of 2021, and we've had overwhelming support. In 18 months, we've garnered 9,000 members.
Wow. Yeah.
And can I ask you a quick question?
You may.
I'm still hearing the background music.
Would you like me to turn that off?
Yeah, it's a big distraction for me.
Let me take care of that for you.
It's like, there goes a squirrel, and I want to look for the squirrel. Now, perfect. But yeah, I love what I do, and the reason that I got involved in cannabis advocacy to begin with is because in 2012, August 17th of 2012, my sister died of breast cancer. And if she had had access to full extract cannabis oil, I believe her life would have been saved. And on August 18th of 2012, I feel like I had a divine calling to become a cannabis advocate for sick, suffering, and dying people. Even though I myself had been a consumer of cannabis for 47 years. So I started using cannabis when I was 15 years old, and I'm going to be 63 in January. So that's how I became a cannabis advocate. I believe that it's something that it should have never been prohibited. 87 years ago, cannabis was prohibited. And we're still trying to figure out in the state of Alabama if it's, so let me digress for a second. They passed medical cannabis legislation, but they don't want to do anything about recreational because they think that it's dangerous or it's addictive. Well, if it's dangerous and it's addictive, how could it be medically proven to help people? You can pass the medical, but the average everyday citizen can't have access to it. A lot of people like to compare it to alcohol, but there is no comparison. Alcohol kills, cannabis heals. It's my little click phrase. So, but that's kind of how I got involved in cannabis advocacy. And you are correct. It is a passion for me. This is not a passing fancy. I spend a tremendous amount of time, 10 to 14 hours a day, working on cannabis advocacy. And fortunately, this year, and you are one of the candidates that we endorsed, a Libertarian candidate here in the state of Alabama, we have endorsed 38 candidates to date for the 2022 midterm election. So we're very excited about that because we need pro-cannabis candidates, especially in the Alabama legislature, that could sponsor legislation to change all of this and to improve the freedom and the liberty for the citizens here in the state. And I know that you're a federal candidate. So could you tell us, the members of the Alabama Cannabis Coalition, what your positions are, that why we endorsed you?
Yeah. I do believe that I've had the fortune to travel all over this country of ours and have been to states that have decriminalized and legalized recreational marijuana. And, the sun still comes up, right? The world has not turned upside down.
Right.
And so as a federal candidate, I really believe that I would agree with some of the states that have taken the lead in this regard. So I do believe in the decriminalization and legalization of cannabis, both for medicinal and recreational use. I believe that folks that are either currently incarcerated or have been released. I do believe in pardons. I believe in releases and expungements of nonviolent drug offenders. I believe that you know the ability to grow a plant on your own property is really no one else's business but your own. And so at the federal level, I would be fighting for and advocating to help bring those points of view across the entire United States. And I think it's important that you know individuals are allowed to make choices, right? So I'm not advocating for everyone in this country to start being a cannabis user, but they should have that right to do so, assuming that their choices and actions don't cause harm to others or their property. And so,
Right.
and maybe this is a question I could ask of you, Marty, because you mentioned having been a cannabis user for a long time. I strongly believe that you know, too much of anything can be unwise, right? So too much, too much potato chips is unwise. Too much alcohol is unwise. And so I like you mentioned earlier, cannabis, I think it's a medicine. And if you're in pain, I think it's an excellent tool. And I would much rather, personally, advocate for the use of cannabis for pain management than some of these pharmaceutical drugs that they push so hard on people. And so, you know, could you speak a little bit to, you know, obviously you're very pro cannabis. I would just be curious. I mean, um, obviously, if you do the research, right, no one has ever died of too much
Right.
cannabis use. But would you agree or disagree with that? Just like with anything, you kind of have to know your own body and make the decisions that are best for you.
Right. Well, I have always believed, probably in the past 11 years, and it took me the past 11 years to recognize this fact about my own cannabis use. All cannabis use is medicinal. People may not realize that their cannabis use is medicinal. They may be using it when they come home from work because they're home from work and they want to relax. But at some point in time during the day, something probably happened to them that they thought to themselves, I can't wait to get home so that I can use some cannabis because I need to relax. I personally have probably been using cannabis medicinally for some anxiety issues.
Mm,
I think we all have anxiety. It's not like I've got an anxiety disorder, but I know that there were times in my life that I probably did use it for recreational and other times that I used it for medicinal purposes. So I do believe that all cannabis use is medicinal. And I really and truly believe that what someone wants to do in the privacy of their own home, or in the privacy of the home of a friend that they may be visiting, that it's really not any different than if they were using something else like, I hate using the term alcohol, but you were talking about the potato chips, that could be abused. Food can be abused. I mean, we have an obesity problem, but we're not trying to outlaw food, or we're not trying to regulate how much food someone can drink, how much food people can eat. Sugar is a killer. It's a known killer. I mean, it causes disease in the body. We have a diabetic epidemic, in the nation, but nobody is outlawing sugar, So I can't understand why when something can be used that's medicinal that has never killed one. Let's talk about tobacco, for instance. We're not outlawing tobacco, and we know that processed tobacco is processed with chemicals. I know a lot of people grow their own tobacco and smoke their own tobacco. So I really don't know about the nicotine and how that affects the body. But we're not outlawing that. But we have a plant here, and I know why cannabis is prohibited. It is profit driven. The nylon rope, DuPont, they wanted it outlawed because hemp rope was a competition. The pharmaceutical companies were just beginning in the late 30s to produce synthetic pharmaceutical drugs, and cannabis was a competition to that. William Randolph Hearst, who was in the timber industry, hemp was a competition to the timber industry because you can make paper out of hemp. I was in a restaurant yesterday, and there was a guy in the timber industry in the restaurant, and I overheard him talking about the price of XYZ as it related to his timber industry. And he was sitting at the table beside of me, and I spoke up, and I said, have you ever thought about getting out of the timber industry and growing hemp? And I really and truly think, no fault of his own, he probably didn't really understand what I was talking about. But I always try to interject and educate people in whatever circumstance I'm in or whatever situation that I'm in, to let people know, it takes, I think it's like 6 to 7 years to bring a pine tree to be able to be produced for wood products, for paper products, whatever they're using that timber for. But cannabis can be matured in 90 days. In some areas of the country where the climate is like it is in the state of Alabama, probably in some parts of the state of Alabama, you could have 4 seasons probably within a year, definitely 3 seasons. So why would you want to grow something that it took 6 to 9 years to mature? It makes absolutely no sense, but because there's that competition, and it's like people have blinders on, I've always been in the timber industry, and I'm just going to use the timber industry. I've always been in the timber industry. My father was in the timber industry. My grandfather was in the timber industry. We're in the timber industry. We don't want to talk about anything else, which it would be more financially beneficial to a lot of these other industries to really look into hemp and cannabis. And hemp is non-flammable. Products that are made with hemp, like hempcrete, hemp furniture, hemp flooring.
Yeah, Marty, there's so many different angles to talk about cannabis in hemp, but certainly, we talk about as a nation, right? These free trade agreements that are actually managed trade agreements that shipped a lot of our manufacturing jobs overseas. I mean, we're talking about giving Alabamians, and at the federal level, I'm talking about giving Americans the ability to have the freedom to grow those plants, and that we could have manufacturing opportunities, new industries. That's one of the questions one of my potential constituents asked me is, what would be some of the new jobs that we could bring to District 4? And certainly I have some other answers, but I think one of them is, cannabis and hemp products. I mean, there's no reason why Alabama and the USA as a whole could be a leader in producing these products that often have superior quality just due to the intrinsic materials that exist in the plants.
Well, I'm not sure if I have ever mentioned this to you just in private conversations that we've had, but are you aware that every nation that's a member of the United Nations has signed a treaty with the United Nations that they will not grow cannabis or hemp? So it's a very tightly woven and convoluted situation that prohibition is. And in order to unweave all of that, people think you can just wave a wand over it, or Joe Biden can just snap his fingers and, it's going to be legalization across the board, and, it's just going to be a free-for-all. But because states actually have rights, and that's where the focus of the Alabama Cannabis Coalition is in the state of Alabama. We're fighting for states' rights. but I didn't know if I had ever mentioned that to you before. And since you're going to the federal level, it would probably be beneficial for you to be aware of that. But I think we talked about it.
Yeah, that's one of the animating principles of my run is I advocate for decentralization of power. And what does that mean? It means that the folks in DC, I think, have been crafting legislation and voting on things more than the Constitution actually permits them to do. And so
Absolutely.
I would be in favor of taking as much decision making and power away from Washington D.C. and kicking it back to the states, and then as much as possible having state legislatures try to do the same thing, take as much power out of their state capitals and put it in the hands of individuals, their families, and their communities. At the federal level, I will say this: I think one of the most unfortunate outcomes of our nation's federal policy on cannabis is that it has strengthened the drug cartels, which are very
Oh,
violent.
please.
And people don't always think about that, I guess what I'm trying to say is at the federal level, we put a lot of money and resources into the DEA and a lot of other law enforcement apparatuses that try their best to stop what they have deemed illegal plants and substances from crossing the borders, and that creates the black market, and that allows for these violent drug cartels to achieve power and wealth. And I do think at the federal level, if we decide to end the failed the war on drugs, that we would be severely handicapping these drug cartels that are responsible for a lot of the violence that happens along the border. And so again, whether a citizen wants to engage with cannabis or not, by legalizing it and having entrepreneurs and small businesses start growing and setting up retail operations, I think that you bring it out of the shadows, and you handicap the drug cartels, which the only people in favor of the drug cartels, I would think, are the cartels themselves.
Right.
Um, and one of the biggest unknown factors when you have cannabis being illegal is if you were to fly to Denver or to Seattle, Portland, Oregon, New Mexico, any of these states that have made strides to decriminalize and legalize, you go into a very clean retail setting and you can ask someone who's very knowledgeable to help get you what you want. And that it's not going to have anything extra or additional in it.
Right.
And, a
It's going
lot
to be
of
a
people,
safe product.
correct. So, I just really wanted to make sure that during our conversation today, I would say again at the federal level, I really do believe that we don't properly use our law enforcement. We send them on these kind of wild goose chases to try to stop plants from crossing the border. And then our local law enforcement, again, it almost turns into a source of tax revenue for the local municipality, that instead of trying to prevent violent crimes from happening, robberies, murder, rape, things of that nature, they're setting up speed traps and they're trying to harass citizens who have a little bit of a plant in a baggie in their backpack, and they're walking around and they're getting in my mind, harassed. And so, again, at the federal level, I really do think that we can do a lot to end the failed war on drugs. And I think the lowest hanging fruit is cannabis. You may not be made aware of this, Marty, but there's actually been some polling done by the Libertarian Party of Alabama, in which the polling seemed to indicate that a majority of Democrat, Independent, and Republican voters agreed with legalizing marijuana. So we've gotten to the point where one of the reddest states in the union, one of the most conservative states in the union, now we have a majority across Democrats, independents, and Republicans that they actually agree with this. And so, um, you know, you know, it, if there was ever a time for our elected officials to read the tea leaves in the polls, I think it would be now. And again, I think that it would be a large boost, not just to the state GDP, but to our nation.
Okay. I do want to digress just a little bit when we were talking about the black markets, because I really and truly do not want to demean the black market, because even though the cartels are there and they're nasty, if it wasn't for the black market, the people who needed access to cannabis would not have had access. Meaning, for the past 47 years, because of where I have lived geographically, I would not have had access to cannabis. But what causes the black market to be violent is the control and the regulation. That's where the violence comes in. It's because when they're sneaking around, in the back alleyways and stuff, and then when they, and then other cartels find out that they're sneaking around in the back alleyways. If everything was in the light, there wouldn't be any crime associated with cannabis, other than the normal amount of crime that would be associated with somebody. I know there's a black market for cigarettes. I lived in North Carolina for years. They would send out people would come in with tractor trailers and take cigarettes back to New York City because the taxation was so high on it that there was a market for black market tobacco in the northern states. So there's always going to be some black market with everything, but it's the regulation and the control that causes the black markets to rise up. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands what causes black markets. It's not the tobacco that causes the crime. It's not the cannabis that causes the crime. It's the regulation and control of a product that someone wants to buy, and it doesn't matter if it's moonshine. They're going to find a means to gain access to that, but it's the regulation and control that causes the criminal element.
Yeah, Marty, I think the part of this issue that really gets to me the most, and it may not be just cannabis specific, but I've read story after story of people who are challenged with horrific, health circumstances, either for themselves or for their children. And they're trying anything in the world, right, to figure out how I can best, heal or, reduce pain. And I've just read so many stories where, because our FDA or someone hasn't, green lighted a particular substance or treatment that might be legal in somewhere else in the world, I just really believe that when you have someone who has cancer, you have someone who has a terminal illness, the least that we could do is try to help those people not suffer so much. And I think
or save their lives, John. If a parent knows and they've done their due diligence and they've done their research and they know that there's something out there that has saved another child's life that's suffering with the same ailment that their child is suffering with, they will do anything to save their child's lives. And people have had to relocate to other states. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't want to just talk about people that are sick. I'm talking about people that are dying. And everybody tells me, when we were fighting for that medical legislation that I fought so hard on, and I was not the only one in the state. There were other people out there, families who had children that were working on that. But I gave everything that I had within me to work on that medical legislation. And I had people tell me time after time, it may not pass this year, it may pass next year. And I always came back and said this: people are dying. They don't have time to wait. They don't have 6 months to wait. They don't have 18 months to wait. They're dying now, and they need access to this now. So you're right. Families are having to do anything that they can to save their children's lives, and this is really what it boils down to. It's profit over lives. And you were talking about the pharmaceutical industries, pharmaceutical companies, and the Food and Drug Administration. Now, I want everybody to hear this. Pharmaceutical companies and the FDA are the largest legal drug cartel in the world. These pharmaceutical companies have carte blanche with the FDA. They can get anything approved. They can say they've gone through whatever testing. It's just like with the COVID vaccine, and I don't want to get off on medical freedom, but some of this does have things to do with medical freedom. But, they started vaccinating people, and that stuff had been supposedly been through testing. That was all that to me, and I'm coming from a libertarian conspiracy theorist standpoint, believe that was all about profit. And that wasn't all that it was about. But, when you have someone that is in control, like cannabis is on the Controlled Substance Act, it's a Schedule I drug right up there with heroin. Okay, if cannabis is compared to heroin, and I've been using cannabis, not heroin, I've been using cannabis for 47 years. If it was as dangerous as heroin, I wouldn't have semi-retired at the age of 49. I wouldn't have been completely out of debt at the age of 49. I would have never graduated from high school as valedictorian of my class, and I was stoned every day when I was in high school. So people can make all of the excuses that they want. And when I first became a cannabis advocate, John, I really and truly thought, I was so naive to think that this was an education problem. I really thought if we just get into the legislative offices and we let these people know that this is not the big bad wolf, this is not the devil's lettuce, I thought that would solve the problem. But it wasn't an education problem. It wasn't an education problem at all. It's just all about, they've got other lobbyists that are in their pockets. They've got the timber lobbyists in their pockets. They've got the pharmaceutical lobbyists in their pockets. Anybody that's in the chemical industry is in their pockets. And people say, well, you really don't know that. Well, yeah, I really do know that, because candidates typically listen to two things. They listen to their constituents who vote them into power. If they don't hear anything from their constituents, they're not going to do anything about anything because it's not an issue for them. And they listen to lobbyists because lobbyists are the ones that pad their pocket. So if the citizens in these states that want to see some progress made do not stand up and speak out, as I have been doing for the past 11 years, and I have had my House rep here in the state of Alabama, Bob Fincher, and my state senator, Randy Price, tell me this. Marty, you're the only person that I hear from about this. None of my other constituents contact me about this. This is not an issue in the state of Alabama. So when I try to encourage other citizens that are members of the ACC to stand up and speak out, they just keep saying, well, somebody needs to do something about this. But people don't realize they are somebody. So having said all that, we started out talking about children, and, it's not just because somebody's sick, but we're trying to save their lives. And it's economical. It makes economic sense. Even the gross domestic product here in the state of Alabama could surge. And I believe that cannabis in the Southeast, I really believe this, could rival cotton production.
On an unrelated topic, Marty, I had a conversation with someone the other day talking about how our current governor was, in some poll ranked the 7th most favorable governor in the whole country. And I believe that our gubernatorial candidate, Dr. Jimmy Blake, has it right, that all the other states in the Southeast are making major moves to lower the tax burden on their citizens. And so in that same vein, whichever state in the Southeast is the first mover on cannabis is going to have such a leg up on everyone else. And so
absolutely. I believed it for years.
I want to thank you for all your hard work on this topic. I want to maybe close with this, which is, you and I were both doing very different kinds of work. So you are passionately advocating and lobbying on the behalf of the citizens of the state on this particular issue. I am running for Congress in Alabama's 4th Congressional District. Um, for anyone who watches this stream and they live in the state of Alabama and they want to get more involved with the Alabama Cannabis Coalition, can you kind of tee up how they would do that? And it sounds like one of the most powerful things they can do is to reach out to their elected representatives as well as the candidates that are running at the state level and ask them, where do you stand on this? And explain that, the reason you're asking is, um, again, that state in the Southeast that makes the first move is going to have a tremendous amount of, I think, economic growth and activity because of that.
Okay. Well, I'd like to invite anybody that would like to join the movement here in the state of Alabama. If you will just go to alabamacannabiscoalition.org. That's alabamacannabiscoalition.org. And if you go to that domain, it'll take you straight to our Facebook social media group. And you can join the group there. You have to join the group to actually be able to participate in the group and make posts and ask questions. And we have endorsed those 38 candidates here in the state of Alabama, 36, which are Libertarian candidates, because we believe that the Libertarian Party is the only party in the state of Alabama that is going to give us the hope to be able to provide to the citizens the things that I stated before: the right to home grow, expungement of cannabis convictions, decriminalization, and legalization. But something that I do want to touch on before we get off of this live feed is this. Johnny, I want to know, who is your competition and why did you decide to run against Robert Adderholt?
I just got done listening to, I like to listen to a lot of podcasts. And so one of the ones that a lot of people in the country are talking about is how Tulsi Gabbard on Joe Rogan explained why she left the Democrat Party. I grew up in a Republican household. I registered as a Republican right when I turned 18. And I followed politics. Yeah, I followed politics for a while. And I started to get more and more involved, right? So I would go to meetings and I would meet people, and I volunteered on Dr. Ron Paul's presidential primary campaigns in 2008 and 2012. And the more I got involved, the more I kind of saw how the sausage was made. And to be honest, it's a very top-down organization, right? And what I mean by that is there could be someone like me, very idealistic. Hey, I believe in small, limited government. I want the citizens to have more freedom. I believe that the more individual freedoms we have, the more economic prosperity there would be. But pretty much when they use those talking points, it's just empty promises. It's just lip service. And so I became more and more disillusioned, I guess you could say. And so when I moved to Tuscaloosa 2 years ago, one of the first things I do, and I've moved a lot, both growing up and as an adult, is I would look to see, who are my elected representatives.
Right.
And I grew up in the state, so I was very familiar with, Senator Shelby, who just retired. He had been there a long time. But I was less familiar with the 25-year incumbent congressperson, Robert Adderholt. And so I went and reviewed his record because I, want to know who's my representative, where do they stand on things. And I was just really kind of shocked when I actually combed through his voting record. 25 years. At the very beginning of his career, he was a big pork barrel spender. So trying to bring home pork projects to Alabama as much as he could. And
would you say that he's a tax and spend Republican?
Well, it's funny. I think it's worse than a tax and spend Republican because he actually does vote to lower taxes. The problem is you can't do that and spend even more.
Right.
So he votes for these bloated omnibus spending bills, which
Hmm.
again, it's like the only I believe this the way the system was supposed to work, Marty, is you have a single issue, you debate it, you vote it up or down. But basically, what they do is the
Right.
leadership of both of the two old parties go into a smoky filled room and they come out with a 900-page bill and they put it on their desk and say, "Hey, we're going to vote on this in 4 hours." And
And
I mean,
nobody has time to read the bill.
nobody reads the bill. And so, after reviewing, right, he voted to send both our brave men and women and our money over to Iraq and Afghanistan. He voted for the Patriot Act, which we now know in retrospect has been used against Americans. He kept voting to leave our troops overseas, to keep sending money over there, and so at least a Democrat is somewhat honest. They'll look you in the eyes and say, "I'm going to raise your taxes." Republicans say, "I'm going to lower your taxes," but then when you're not paying attention because you're taking your kids to soccer and Boy Scouts and everything, they just spend, spend, spend. I mean, he voted for
Right.
the most ridiculous spending, even Obama's cash for clunkers, right? Which in the grand scheme of things is probably just a drop in the bucket, right? But here's the deal. He's he's been in office for 25 years. I believe in term limits, okay? So, that's already kind of one strike. And I say it with all sincerity that even people in Congress that I like, right? So I was a big Ron Paul fan when he served in the House. I know he served for a long time. I would still advocate that, even though he may have been one of the few good states people we had in DC, I believe in term limits because, you don't get very many exceptions to the rule. The rule
Right.
is they all go up there, they completely disassociate with the communities that they're supposed to represent, and they become a part of that metropolitan Washington D.C.
Machine.
machine. Exactly.
Hmm.
So that's the first strike. 25 years. I'm not. That's too long. The second was his voting record and the fact that he's voted for all this increased spending. And I think the stat that most blows my mind is that while he's been in office, the national debt has increased 600%. So in 1998, it was $5 trillion, and it's now just crossed $31 trillion. And
Hmm.
so, for anyone that believes in fiscal responsibility, fiscal conservatism, or balanced budgets, there is no other word but failure to describe him and all the other politicians in DC, because you've heard the phrase they spend our money like drunken sailors. And I'll ask you, Marty, the country's $31 trillion in debt. Do you feel like like what did we get for that, right? 30 like this the International Space Station I think was $150 billion. For 31 trillion we should have colonized the moon by now, right? But the roads are still bad. The schools aren't producing the results that the parents want for their kids. Where did all this money go? And
I want to answer. I want to answer that question. I'll tell you what we got. We got satellites in the cosmos that's invading our personal space, and they know everything that we're doing at every second of every day. That's what those satellites do. They're invading our personal privacy. That's one thing that we got. Because
well,
our government participated in sending those satellites up. And it was all about tracking us.
I just
That's my opinion. And I'm not in favor of that.
yeah, I just think that you know, I think the thing I've learned the most throughout this whole process is when I knock on people's doors and I ask them how do they vote, and if they respond, I vote Republican. I'll kind of take them through a decision tree
Mhm.
kind of dialogue and say, "Do you agree with term limits?" They all say yes. I go, "Do you realize the current guy's been there for 25 years? Do you feel like that's too long?" Yes. Okay. So then I'm like, "Do you believe in fiscal responsibility?" Yes. So why do you vote Republican? Well, the Democrats want to, take more of my money out of my paycheck. I say, "Hey, I'm right there with you. I don't want more money taken out of my check either. But at the same time, the government has grown by 600% over the last 25 years. And Republicans have voted alongside Democrats
Mhm.
to support that and bless that. And a lot of them go, wow, I guess I didn't really realize that. And I get it.
Right.
Um, I had a conversation with one of my best friends in this world last week, and he was asking me about my campaign, and I was kind of sharing with him. He said, "You know what?" He said, "I'm just trying to put food on the table, and I want to take my kids to Gulf Shore once a year. That's all I want. That's all I'm asking for." And I get it, right? Because people are so busy with their lives that it's hard to wade into the minutia and all this stuff. And I think that the people and the power apparatus in DC, they realize that, and that's why they're able to get away with so many things. And so
Right.
my
I believe it.
candidacy,
I believe it's part of their modus operandi. Those that are in charge to brainwash people into thinking that their voice doesn't count, their vote doesn't count. They brainwash our citizens, and the citizens disengage and believe that what will truly bring them the most joy and happiness in their life is to be able to provide a roof over their family's home, for their family to be healthy and for them to be go on vacation once a year. Which, if they had true liberty and freedom and they weren't taxed to death, there's no telling what the possibilities would be, but they've bought into that myth. And I apologize for interrupting you, but I just wanted to say that there's so much more out there of possibilities other than just going to the beach once a year.
yeah,
Become self-employed.
I think, so you asked me why I decided to run. I've never ran for public office before. It's been very interesting, and I guess I strongly believe that we have a system that is broken in DC. It attracts the wrong type of people to power, right? So we have all these
Absolutely.
people who I don't want to disparage the profession of being a lawyer, but think about this. Lawyers are trained to be argumentative and to win their point. That's what lawyers are trained to do. We need problem solvers. We need
Right.
entrepreneurs. We need engineers. We need nurses. We need, communication professionals. We need people from all walks of
Walks of
life
life.
to get together and say, here's a problem. We have too many homeless veterans in our nation. How do we solve that? And it's not just, I'm going to take more money out of Johnny and Marty's paycheck and give it to some organization, and then it never gets solved. And I think that's the big con is, nothing ever improves for the average everyday American. They use fear and hatred to bring out the worst in people, to other the other side. And I think humans, if we could be more empathetic and say, I want to see where we agree, and how can we move towards whatever end that is, whether it's legalization for cannabis, whether it's improving our schools. I think there's so many things that people want. And if we could just learn to communicate with each other, we could solve big issues. But the
Right.
current batch of people in DC are not interested in that. And I think it's going to take more people like myself who are going to step way out of their comfort zone
And
and
become
say,
engaged in the process.
yeah. And maybe we'll end with this, Marty, is that in my particular race, it is a three-way race. Um, I'm really excited for the Libertarian Party of Alabama because there's a lot of two-way races, right? So the normal disparaging remark against libertarians is that they play a spoiler. Well, there's a lot of races in this state that there's only two candidates. So it's not a spoiler. It's a selection between
Right.
those two individuals. In my race, the reason I'm excited about it is Adderholt usually runs unopposed, or if someone does run against him, he wins around 80 to 20%. Okay. So there's a 20% electorate in my district that, um, voted for the same gentleman last in 2020 when Democrats had a banner year in election turnout, right? He only got like 18 or 19% of the vote. So I'm talking to those folks and saying, look, we may agree on some things, we probably disagree on others, but if your goal is to unseat the incumbent, if your guy's, capped at 18%, he can't win. That was the Democrat year, right? 2020.
Right.
So, what's more important to you? Is it voting for the person you identify more closely with, or is it unseating the Republican? And then I'm talking to that 80% Republican and say, you almost never get a chance in this life to have your cake and eat it too. And what I mean by that is there is a lot of things on almost every issue that I believe I'm basically an upgrade to on Adderholt, whether it's civil
There's
liberties,
no doubt.
whether it's saying no to being policeman of the world, whether it's fiscal responsibility and balanced budgets. And so, to those Republican voters who all I ever know is complain about rhinos, right? And it's like, well, can you name for me 5 Republicans that aren't a rhino? Because that's all I ever hear Republicans say is all the people in Washington D.C. are a bunch of rhinos. So it's like, okay, well, why do we keep voting for them? Why do they keep increasing our national debt? Why do they keep not listening and obeying the Constitution, which says Congress has to declare war before we commit our troops to a conflict zone on some other part of the globe? And so I'm trying to explain to them that I believe in this race, this is the safest opportunity for a Republican voter who has never not voted Republican to vote for Johnny C. Cochran. And I promise that I am going to be a thorn in the side of Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy, Schumer, and all of these people of the DC establishment that I'm going to demand that we have time to read these bills. And I'm going to very publicly call out things that are not right and maybe, aren't being broadcasted to a wide audience. Because again, I think just like our Alabama state legislature is part-time, I think we can make Congress part-time. I think we can reduce their salaries. I think we can make a law that says you have to spend X number of days living in the area that you're supposed to
District that
represent.
you represent.
That you have
Absolutely.
to spend X number of town halls and forums so that the public can actually get in front of you and explain to you why they're so frustrated and what are the challenges that we actually need to address. And so I'm very excited. I have no idea how the race is going to turn out. I've been going all across District 4, and I think there is a lot of interest in what is this third option here on the ballot. And I want people in DC to know that the Libertarian Party across the country and the Libertarian Party of Alabama, this is just the beginning. We're not going away. We want to actually improve the lives of Alabamians, and we're going to do it, and we're going to do it incrementally. It's not just this election cycle. We're gonna have a fun time on November 8th, and then we're gonna get right back to work the next day, because the government is consistently infringing on our rights. They're making it harder for people to start small businesses. They're making it harder for people to make them jump through hoops like licensing, right? Like, you shouldn't need a license to cut somebody's hair. You just,
Well,
get in,
occupational licensing.
go through an apprenticeship program, learn how to cut hair, learn how to braid hair, whatever your desire and talents lie, and
And the
stop.
person that needs that service makes the due diligence and determines who they want to do their nails, who they want to give them a massage, who they want to give them a haircut. But the government feels like they need to protect everybody and put everybody in a bubble and control and regulate everything. But Johnny, I want you to know how much the Alabama Cannabis Coalition supports your efforts in District 4. We wish you a tremendous amount of success. We're encouraging our members to support you and just be safe out there. And I will be joining you on Saturday, October the 29th. You have an event up in Gadsden, Alabama, and I know you're probably needing to go, but could you quickly tell all of our members that live in the Gadsden area, maybe Anniston, Oxford, Jacksonville, Huntsville,
Yes,
that area, what about the event and when it's going to be and what to
sure.
expect?
On the bottom of the screen here, you'll see that my campaign website, johnnyccochran4al.com, is scrolling, as well as votelibertyalabama.com. I would encourage you to go to both. But on my campaign webpage, we have some events planned. On 10/27 for your members, I don't have the schedule detailed yet, but many of our state libertarian candidates are coming to campaign in Tuscaloosa. And so I will be posting some information about those days' events. But the big one, as you mentioned, is Saturday, October 29th, at the mall in Gadsden with some local first responders. There will be a trunk or treat event at 6 p.m. So if the kids want to get a head start on Halloween, please bring them out. Should be a fun time. And then following the trunk or treat, that starts at 6, at 7 o'clock at Spartan Pro Wrestling, which also takes place at the Gadsden Mall. I have issued a challenge to Robert Adderholt. You see, the Democrat in this race, Rick Neighbors, challenged Adderholt to a debate. Now, Adderholt didn't show up. I did. So I'm coming to think, Marty, that perhaps Robert Adderholt, maybe his strengths lie elsewhere. Maybe he doesn't want to debate ideas or defend his vision for the country.
Right.
Maybe he doesn't want to engage in a battle of intellect. And so I have thrown the gauntlet down and said maybe he would prefer a test of strength. So Spartan Pro Wrestling is going to allow me some ring time. And whether Robert Adderholt wants to do a push-up contest, whether he wants to do some deadlift weights, or I can't think of anything more American than a good old-fashioned professional wrestling match. And so I will dust off my wrestling boots and prepare in the event that he would like to show up and actually interact in an unscripted environment at Spartan Pro Wrestling. So tickets are on sale now. All that information is at my campaign website. They will likely sell out. So I would recommend buy your tickets in advance. And I'll kick in that we are doing a canned food drive that will benefit a local ministry that helps feed people who are experiencing food insecurity. So,
Okay, awesome. I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask.
bring a canned good with you. And I hope to see people out there. It will be a fun time. And both before and after the event, would love to shake hands and meet as many voters as possible and answer their questions, because I do believe I am the most successful candidate in this race. I want to answer your questions. I want to earn your vote. And I don't know that many of our elected representatives feel like they have to earn your vote. They feel like because they have an R or a D next to their name, that
Right.
you're just going to give them your vote based on your voting history. And I believe that if you've been there for 25 years, you think you have it on cruise control. And that's what makes Johnny C. Cochran so dangerous, is because I'm having a lot of conversations, And to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, I think I have found one person who spoke favorably of the incumbent. Everyone else either didn't know him by name, or if they did know him, they weren't aware of his voting record. And after I explained that, they weren't too pleased with him.
Right.
So we'll see what happens on election day.
Well, we appreciate your time. The Alabama Cannabis Coalition appreciates your time. We wish you tremendous success, and I'll be seeing you on Saturday the 29th.
Okay, Marty, take care.
Okay, Johnny, be safe on the highway.
You too.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
You're so welcome.